Alright, setup for Dark Matter. This is setting up for a 6-player game. You start out with the center sphere tile, which is going to have the sphere on it. You place it in the center. And now you place the neutral zone. The neutral zone in the full version, this is the prototype, will have gray borders to help better identify them. But there is also going to be a little sphere icon on the bottom of them to help identify what tiles are the neutral zone tiles. So you go ahead and just randomly kind of place them. The first 3. You want to get one of every resource down, and then from then on you're going to place their matching resource on the opposite side. So for instance, the asteroid, you're going to place its matching asteroid opposite it. You're going to place the matching sun opposite. And you're going to place the matching nebula opposite. And then from then on you're going to shuffle the rest of the token, or the rest of the hex board pieces, and you're going to place them down randomly to generate the rest of the starting. Once you're done placing all of the tiles, you're going to take out all of the starting tiles and hand them to the players matching the color that they're starting with. Now you're going to go ahead and roll and see who goes first, or figure it out any other way that you guys prefer for first player. That first player is then going to decide whether or not to place their starting position first or to place it last and go first. Purple, we'll say purple rolled and purple gets to go first. They're going to decide to place first, and they're going to place their starting position right here. Purple now will get to decide what starting resource will be on that starting position. So they already have dilithium with the nebula, neutronium with the asteroids, and a planet, which will give them trade goods. So the only thing they're missing is antimatter from a sun. Due to the fact that there's no antimatter close by as well, they're going to go ahead and make their starting resource area a antimatter generating one. Alright, now it will go counterclockwise for placement, and then as soon as we get to the last person, after they place theirs, they will be the first player of the game and start playing, and once play starts, it'll be clockwise. All the players have placed their starting locations and chosen their starting resource. You are also going to go ahead and put the 1 tiles with the circle side up on every empty spot, excluding the center neutral zone tiles, which are the 6 around the sphere. Those will get 2. These are the resource indicators showing how much they will produce on their turn, with the only ones being 2 being the central neutral zone. Players will now set up their starting positions. They will place a starbase on their starting sector. They will place 2 freighters on their starting sector, and they will set up their little area in front of them. To set it up, you place all your ship tokens on the front side, which is the side not marked by a MK2 symbol. That is the upgraded version. You place them on the non-upgraded side so that you can see what their stats are. You also place your 5 research options. You can place them however you want. When you research them, you can place them off to the side to show that you have unlocked that research. And you also have your 4 promissory notes, which you can trade to other players to kind of heighten the agreement, to actually make it so it has some teeth to it, if someone was to break it. So you go ahead and set all that up. Each player is then dealt 1 research, 1 influence, and 1 of every resource, which is a trade good, a dilithium, an antimatter, neutronium, an influence, and a research. Last but not least, each player will place 1 fighter token. Fighters are this ship here on the score track, starting at 1 for the 1 victory point from their starbase. The game ends when a player gets to 8 victory points and has that 8 victory points at the start of their turn. During their turn, the first thing players do on their turn is produce. So we'll start with green. Green will start out by producing 1 neutronium, because that is what they chose as their starting resource. They take 1 neutronium. Now after production, they can do lots of other things. This includes moving, this includes exploration, this includes encountering different things in the sectors, this includes trading, both with the bank or with other players. Everything they can do now except build. Build is going to be the last thing they do. So green is going to go ahead and start exploring these sectors. He started with neutronium, so he doesn't really need to go get that neutronium to start his next round with, but he does really want this dilithium. So he's going to move over here, flip this token over to show he's explored it, and then draw an event. Green draws strategic resource. He will place a strategic resource token on there, and from now on, that spot is worth a victory point to whoever controls it. Control is determined by whoever has the most ships there. Doesn't matter the type of ship. The only thing that grants total control is a starbase, which will always have total control over the sector it is built in. No one can take that control away, no matter how many ships they have. The only way to take it away is to destroy the starbase. So green will play the strategic resource token there to show that, and then he will also go up a victory point. Now once you explore a sector, which is what green just did by flipping it over after moving into it, that is the end of your movement. Exploring, encountering, or battling ends the movement there. You cannot do any further movement with that ship that you just explored, encountered, or battled with. However, green does have another ship. So green's going to go ahead and move here. He'll move there and then he'll explore by flipping this over. Draw another event card. Plentiful resources. This changes the system worth from a 1 to a 2 for the rest of the game. Green will then change that out, and now on his next turn he will be getting 2 production there, and that is of neutronium. He'll then discard those events and continue. He doesn't have anything else he can do with movement. He doesn't have anything else he can do, explore, encounter, anything like that. So green's going to go ahead and build as his final action of the game. So green has a few resources. 2 main options that can be done in the early game are building another freighter, which is what he is using now to move about, and freighters will generate production on his next turn. When you're on your production step, you'll get production for every starbase you have on a sector, every freighter you have on that sector, and every resource outpost you have on a sector. They cannot stack. So if you have 2 freighters on one sector, you still only get that sector's production value once. For instance, next turn, green will get 1 neutronium from his starting spot. He'll get 1 dilithium from this area that his freighter is now in, and then he will get 2 more neutronium from this sector that is now worth a 2, thanks to the plentiful resources. So that's how that will go. Green is going to go ahead and play the less aggressive route, which is to trade 1 of every resource for another freighter that he'll be able to move around next turn and increase his production. Another thing you could do in the very early game is build a fighter, which you can then use to kind of harass your opponents or protect your own interests. That's the end of green's turn, and then play will continue clockwise around the table, taking the same 3 steps, starting out with production, then doing movements, trades, encounters, battle, explore in any order. The only rule is that once you encounter, explore, battle, your movement is done with that ship that you explored, encountered, or battled with. You cannot battle in a sector and then continue your movement if it's a multi-move ship to another sector. And then lastly, you will build using those resources you've accumulated to buy something else. All right, this round, purple, during the end of the player's rounds, the last player, which in this game is purple because purple decided to place first, draws 2 universe event cards, which are Dark Matter and Anomaly Emergence. Dark Matter says to place a Dark Matter token in the very center with the sphere. Dark Matter can be researched by a science vessel and will give you 2 victory points if researched successfully. For a science vessel, you have to roll a certain value, which will be shown on the ship depending on if you've upgraded or not. For a non-upgraded ship, you have to roll a 7 or higher to successfully research that dark matter. For an upgraded MK2 science vessel, it's a 5 or higher, and that's on a D12 die. So that is placed in Anomaly Emergence. You roll a die to see where the anomaly is placed. So that is random. That was a 12. So we count using the little mark on the center tile. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 was rolled, so the anomaly will be placed in this tile. The anomalies are only placed in the 6 neutral zone tiles. The neutral zone also has a certain benefit. You cannot build in the neutral zone. So you can move your ships in there freely, but you cannot build anything in there. So you cannot build a space station, you cannot build a resource outpost, etc. Makes it a little more vulnerable. All right, some other things to go over. Let's say it's Blue's turn. Blue, these wormholes have come up in the game. They come up through the exploration events. Blue is feeling aggressive. They're going to use Wormhole Alpha to go to the other Wormhole Alpha here. Wormhole to wormhole is 1 movement, so they can move there in 1 turn with their destroyer, which has 1 movement. And then once they move there, they're feeling a little frisky. They're going to go ahead and battle green there. Destroyer statistically has a pretty good advantage over 2 fighters, but that freighter being there does add a little bit of fodder that maybe green could use to win. So we're going to go ahead and go do a battle. Blue can go ahead and roll first. It doesn't really matter. Both players are going to be rolling simultaneously every battle turn. Battles will consist of 3 phases. In each phase, the players roll for their ships, then assign hits, and then destroy based on what those hits were done. So Blue is going to roll first. His destroyer is not upgraded, so he just has to roll a 6 or higher to hit. He does. So he will have 1 hit this round. Green has 2 fighters, which are not upgraded. They have to roll an 11 or higher to hit. First one's a 10, so that misses. Second fighter is also a 10, so green did not have good luck that turn. So that is 1 of the 3 battle phases. Blue got 1 hit, so green now has to take 1 hit on one of those ships. Green is going to go ahead and take the hit on his freighter, because he's hoping that he can keep his fighters to maybe destroy that destroyer. The freighter's offering no protection other than a hit that he can use to keep those fighters in play. So destroy his freighter. Now the second round of combat begins. Blue will go ahead and start again. They roll for their destroyer. It misses because it needs a 6 or higher. Green now rolls for fighter number 1, which misses, and fighter number 2, which misses. Nothing on that turn. The final round of combat begins because there's only 3 rounds. Blue will roll again, needs a 6 or higher. Got a 6, so he will hit. Green now rolls, needs an 11 or higher. Got a 9, and on his other fighter got a 1. So green will have to take 1 more hit, and he'll choose to lose a fighter. He only has those options, and that is the end of that combat. So green could choose to move out of that space if he so chooses on his turn. Some other things, blue, while they are battling, or while they are battling with green, they can use certain action cards. So let's say in this instance, green got 1 hit, they rolled an 11 or higher, and they play critical hit. Critical hit allows that 1 hit to destroy whatever ship was assigned that hit. So for instance, destroyers have a hull point value of 2. Hull is how many hits that ship can take before they're destroyed. Fighters, freighters, science ships all have hit point values of 1, of hull values of 1, so they can only be hit once before destroyed. Destroyers have hull points of 2, so they can be damaged before they're destroyed. So let's say green rolls an 11 and blue goes ahead and says, okay, I'll take the hit on my destroyer, and he's about to damage it by turning it upside down to show that it was damaged. And then green says, nope, critical hit, that ship is now destroyed instead of damaged. That would be a massive blow. Green can now play something called emergency shields to prevent that from happening. They unfortunately don't have that, so they will lose their destroyer to 1 lucky hit off the fighter. This kind of adds some, you don't know what action cards your opponent has. It makes you a little hesitant sometimes to move in your big ships without some backup from some lighter ships, and makes you hesitant to take the damage versus maybe assign that damage to a fighter. It kind of adds a little bit more strategy to combat. So in this case, we'll say green won. Their little fighter destroyed the whole destroyer with 1 nice hit. Very good for green, very bad for blue. And that's just how it goes sometimes. Now we'll go over movement. Movement is pretty simple in this game. Speed is the factor of how many sectors you can move during your movement phase. If the ship does anything like encountering, exploring, or battling that ends the movement for that ship, even if they still have movement left, So blue is going to move their science ship to go and get this nice juicy dark matter over there. So blue's going to move 1, 2, because the science ship has a speed of 2. And then they're going to go ahead and try and encounter that dark matter. Now for the science ship, a non-upgraded science ship, blue will need a 7 or higher to get the dark matter. They roll a 9, that is successful. Blue immediately goes up 2 victory points, and that dark matter now has 1 full round around the table for other players to try and get it before it disappears off the board. So, if blue went, when it comes back on blue's, beginning of blue's turn, that dark matter will go away. So blue will not get to try and go after it again. And any players that have successfully encountered it will get those victory points as well. If blue is the only one, then that was great for blue. They get 2 and no one else gets any. And 2, that's a big boost for them. Control does come into play. Control, which as we talked about before, is based on the number of ships you have in a sector. Or, in the case of a star bases offer full control always. So let's say in the same instance, green actually had a fighter in there. So blue moves in, and blue cannot research that dark matter, because blue has to have control over a spot to encounter anything. Or explore. Encounter or explore, you have to have control. Battling, you do not have to have control. So blue moves in there, and they do not have control, so now green, with that little fighter, is blocking blue from getting any victory points because they cannot even attempt to explore that dark matter or to encounter that dark matter. Let's say blue had instead moved in with a fighter and a science ship. Blue now has 2 control over green's 1. Blue now can go ahead and encounter that dark matter and get its benefits because it now has control. Movement control does come into play. You can move anywhere for the most part. The only rule is you cannot move from somewhere that you do not control or that is not neutral to somewhere that you do not control or that is not neutral. For instance, this is kind of confusing. The science ship here could move from here, which is somewhere they control, to here, which is now somewhere that's neutral once they move in. That is completely fine. The science ship could then also move from here, somewhere that is neutral, to somewhere here, somewhere that they do not control. That is okay, they can move through those. But for instance, if green had their fighter here, the science ship could move here, somewhere they control, to somewhere that they now do not control even after movement, but they cannot then move from here to here, because that would be somewhere they do not control to somewhere they do not control. However, they could move from here to here, which will be somewhere they do not control to somewhere that is neutral now once they move there. So that just kind of offers a little bit of protection to the base kind of you have in the back. So players cannot just move through all your territory willy-nilly, depending on how you place your ships. Also adds more strategic value to placement, kind of defense as well. For instance, now, blue could move their fighter, which has a movement of 2, with their science ship, and move here. And now, because they moved here, this is now neutral, because 2 and 2 is neutral, which means they could then move from here, a neutral spot, to here, a spot they don't control. And that's how they could get around that defense. Another key point is in order to produce, you have to have control over that sector. For instance, if blue goes ahead and moves their ships in here as their turn, when green's turn is up, they do not have control over this system anymore. It is neutral because 2 and 2. Therefore, they will not produce those 2 dilithium on their turn. So this is a way to kind of prevent players from getting resources while also not necessarily fighting them. Now, it is up to green whether or not that's an act of war and they want to attack them. Totally up to green and up to what the rest of the players think on that. But it is not necessarily attacking, but it is kind of griefing the opponent by saying, no, you're not actually getting those resources you thought you were. So you can use fighters to really kind of get in places and take control away, and you can really use them strategically. But you have to be careful because they're very fragile. Another key point, when the Galactic Council Universe Event card comes up, players will gain an influence for every starbase they have and for every planet that they currently control as soon as it comes up. For instance, blue will get 1 influence for the starbase and 1 influence for this planet that they now control. Purple will also get 2. They'll get 1 for the starbase and 1 for the planet. Green will only get 1 for the starbase. Influence can be traded in at any time during the player's turn for two things. One influence can be traded in for an action card during the player's turn, or, well, as long as you're not in combat. You cannot trade during combat. You cannot try and buy action cards while you're in the middle of fighting someone. You cannot do that. But other than that, you can do it any time during your turn. Or they can do influence, which will be 4 influence, and they can trade 4 influence during their turn for a victory point. That's a good way to get a free victory point that cannot be taken away. Some more information on victory points. Victory points that are temporary, such as strategic resource, such as star bases, and another point that we haven't reached yet is the flagships, such as flagships. So, when a star base is destroyed that gives a victory point, that player will lose the victory point that star base was giving them. When they lose control over the strategic resource, that player will lose the victory point that strategic resource was giving them. When the player loses a flagship, they will lose the flagship they will lose the victory point that the flagship gave them when they built it, and the player that destroyed the flagship will actually get a victory point. For instance, so permanent victory points are the victory points you get from dark matter, from the victory points that you get from destroying an opponent flagship, and the victory points that you get from trading in influence for 4 influence for 1 victory point. Those are permanent. No one can ever take those away from you. So they have a little bit more value at the end game when players are trying to stop that player that just reached 8 from winning, and their main targets are going to be flagships, are going to be star bases, and strategic resource spots. That's how you can stop someone from winning that round and maybe win yourself. Another important aspect is the flagship. Why build it? The flagship's powerful in combat, as well as the flagship is a influence generating tool. Whenever you have the flagship in one of the center 6 neutral zone spots, at the beginning of your turn during production, you will generate 1 influence point for being in a neutral zone with the flagship. And if you want more, every turn that you start with the flagship in the center sphere tile, you generate 2 influence points during the production turn. This is a way to bring players close to the center and kind of instigate maybe some potential battles or some confrontation there. As players are moving their flagships towards the center, that's also where all the juicier production is. That's where dark matter is going to spawn. That's where anomalies are going to spawn. It's going to pull players in together towards the center and kind of add some tension there. Some more final information. There's a couple event cards. One of them are universe events is Gravity Flux. Gravity Flux will swap positions of the original wormholes. So, in this instance, the original wormholes are marked with the little asterisk symbol, which you can see here, little asterisks. So let's say there was wormhole beta and alpha out fully. So the asterisk alpha will swap positions with the asterisk beta, thereby changing the wormholes. So now alpha beta instead of linking these two, now links these two, and alpha instead of linking these two, now links these two, and adds a whole bunch of new opportunities for movement, and now maybe players that were neighbors are no longer neighbors. So kind of adds some variety to the game and kind of changes things up in the middle. Another universe event card I would like to go over with you guys is Dilithium Scarcity. So every resource has a scarcity. The scarcity means that during that turn, during the whole round, players will not produce dilithium, even if they have production on dilithium. No one will get any dilithium that game. You can still get dilithium from the event cards. That'll give you, let's say, take 1 dilithium resource. That will still give you dilithium, but you cannot produce any dilithium. Now, the opposite is also true. There is a dilithium abundance card, which actually lets you produce 1 extra dilithium on any production that you produce dilithium on. So these are a way to kind of like change the market up, increase trading, kind of stuff like that. Last one is Marauders. So Marauders, any player, when a Marauders come up, at any time until the end of the round, they don't have to do it on their turn, they can hold it until the very last minute, can spend 1 credit or 2 of any resource, doesn't have to be matching, any resource they want, even including trade goods, to place a Marauder token on any sector they want to do. A Marauder token, all it does is it takes control from that sector away to the Marauder until the Marauder is destroyed, which will block production. A Marauder will not take control away from a Starbase, because as we've said, Starbases always have control. So let's say green places a Marauder here. Now blue will not get that trade good production from the planet on their turn until they destroy the Marauder. Marauders can be destroyed kind of like battling. You have to battle it, and one successful hit, it is destroyed. The good thing about Marauders is they don't fight back. So you're not going to be taking any hits yourself. You just have to get there as quick as possible and destroy it. Marauders, it's not always, that's why it's good to have star bases there, or resource outposts instead of freighters, because a resource outpost has a combat value of 11. So you can have 3 chances you have 1 chance during your turn to get rid of the Marauder with combat. So when you're fighting a Marauder, it's not like traditional combat. You don't have 3 rounds of combat. You just have 1 per thing. So let's say I have this resource outpost. On my turn, that resource outpost is going to take a pot shot at that Marauder. 11 or higher, I would destroy it. Unfortunately, I did not. So that's why I might be moving some fighters in there. I might be moving some other ships. Try and clean that Marauder out so I get my sweet resources that I am owed. Final points to go over. Remember, at the end of the last player's turn, which in this case is purple because they placed first, they go last, they draw 2 universe events, fulfill what they say, place them face up, and those events stay in play until the next ones are drawn. This comes in a little bit of confusion sometimes when the event card comes up from the regular event stack. That's called Eventful Space. That means you instantly draw another universe event and resolve its effects, and that one will stay in play until the person who triggered that event is next turn, the beginning of their next turn, then that one will go out of play. So that one might stay in play a little bit longer. That's that. Other thing is, at any point during the game, you can use your research to unlock one of those 5 research options, or to upgrade a ship. You just flip the ship over to the Mark II version. Research can also be used to unlock the flagship. The flagship comes locked, and you have to spend a research to unlock it to be able to build it. Whenever you build a ship, you have to pay its cost value, which is at the bottom. This costs 1 antimatter, 1 neutronium, 1 dilithium. All ships will cost an equal amount of every resource. It has its combat value, which is 11, which means I have to roll an 11 or higher. Science value of 0, so this one cannot try and research or encounter the dark matters or anomalies. Has speed of 2, so I can move up to twice. A range is no longer, that is an old statistic. In the new version, range is no longer part of the game. Hull of 1, that means it can only be hit once before it's destroyed. So that's how you can kind of look at your ships and all. Lastly, upgrading freighters. So a freighter during the build phase can be turned into a resource outpost. A resource outpost only cost is the freighter, so you can turn it into the other one. That does not have to be at a star base. That's the only you can do upgrades outside of a star base when you build. Normally you have to build ships at a star base. Upgrades you can do wherever you want. You just cannot do it in the center 6 neutral zone or in the sphere space. Now on your turn, you can also turn a resource outpost into a starbase. This costs 2 of every resource and will get rid of the resource outpost and replace it with the starbase. Now you have the most upgraded kind of defensive spot you can do. It will also get you a victory point, and it will give you a influence when dark matter or when Galactic Council comes up. So that is how you upgrade a freighter into a starbase. And that's how you play Dark Matter. Thank you guys and enjoy the game. Support it on Kickstarter.